"You're black, you can't serve me." Billionaire son yells at black waitress. Her response will leave him in shock. The restaurant buzzed with its usual energy, the soft clinking of silverware, the low hum of conversation. But at one table, a sudden silence fell. Jasmine, a waitress of color, approached a well-dressed young man seated by the window, ready to take his order. Before she could speak, he looked up and coldly said, "You're black, you can't serve me." The words stung, but Jasmine didn't flinch. Instead, she stood tall, her heart racing, and replied calmly, "Let me tell you a story." In that moment, her journey began, not just for the billionaire's son, but for everyone who witnessed it. The room fell quiet, and Jasmine's words would leave a lasting impact on him and everyone around her. Have you ever had a moment that made you stand up for yourself? Let me know in the comments. Jasmine had always believed in the power of kindness. It was a lesson instilled in her by her mother, who had worked tirelessly as a nurse, caring for others while raising Jasmine on her own. Their small town didn't offer much, but they had each other. "You rise above, Jasmine," her mother often said. "Never let anyone see you as less than what you are." It was advice that Jasmine carried with her throughout her life, and it had gotten her through more challenges than she could count. At 28, Jasmine had come to the city with big dreams. She had been working as a waitress for 5 years in one of the most prestigious restaurants in town. It wasn't just a job to her, it was a chance to connect with people, to make them feel heard and cared for, even if only for the few moments they spent at her table. The job had become her life's work, and she loved it. She had learned to read people, to understand their needs without them even having to say a word. It wasn't just about food, it was about creating a moment of peace in an otherwise chaotic world. The restaurant itself was a haven for the city's elite, frequented by businessmen, celebrities, and socialites. The ambience was sophisticated, the food exquisite, and the service impeccable. But Jasmine knew that behind the fine dining, there were also moments of arrogance and entitlement. She had witnessed them before, but never from someone so young, so sure of himself. The young man who had been seated by the window was well known. He was the son of one of the wealthiest billionaires in the country, a man whose name was synonymous with power and influence. Jasmine had seen him before, distant, aloof, and always surrounded by people who catered to his every whim. The billionaire's son was used to being treated like royalty, and his behavior reflected it. He often looked down on others, but this was the first time Jasmine would face him directly. She walked over to his table with a smile, as she always did, ready to offer her usual warm greeting. But as soon as he saw her approaching, his face hardened. Without a second's hesitation, he looked up at her and sneered, "You're black, you can't serve me." The words hit Jasmine like a slap in the face. Her heart skipped a beat. How could anyone be so cruel, so dismissive of another person based on something as trivial as the color of their skin? But she didn't let it show. She stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath. Jasmine had faced discrimination before, but something about this moment felt different. It felt personal. She could feel the eyes of the other diners on her now, the tension in the air thickening. This wasn't just about one man's hatred, it was about something larger. It was about standing up, about not letting someone's ignorance define her. For a moment, she considered walking away, avoiding the confrontation. But then, her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Never let anyone see you as less than what you are." Jasmine squared her shoulders, holding her head high. "Let me tell you a story," she said, her voice calm but firm. The words surprised even her, but they felt right. And in that instant, something shifted. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a woman with a story that deserved to be heard. As she began to speak, the weight of her words settled over the room. The man's smug expression faltered, and the eyes of the other diners softened. Jasmine wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was clear, she wasn't going to let his hatred go unchallenged. Jasmine stood there, her mind racing. The restaurant was quiet now, save for the soft murmur of conversations from other tables, which had all but stopped. It wasn't just the young man's words that stung, but the belief that she, a person working hard to make a living, was somehow less than he was, simply because of the color of her skin. Jasmine had seen this kind of arrogance before, but it had never been aimed at her directly. This was different. This wasn't just about one man's prejudice. This was about a system that had long kept people like her in the shadows. She steadied her breath and looked at him. His face had turned an awkward shade of red, caught off guard by her calmness, yet still dripping with that same entitlement. His eyes flicked nervously, but there was still no apology, no remorse in his gaze. Jasmine could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't about humiliating him, it was about standing firm in who she was. She didn't need his approval, his respect. She was fine without it. Jasmine took a moment, her mind bringing her back to all those years spent watching her mother work long shifts, making sure they had food on the table. She thought of the lessons her mother had taught her: dignity, kindness, and never letting the world diminish you. The words that came out of her mouth weren't planned. But as she spoke, she knew they were the right ones. "Let me tell you a story," she began again, her voice strong but soft. She didn't shout, didn't raise her voice in anger. Instead, she spoke from a place deep inside her, from a part of her that had known struggle and strength, heartache and hope. She shared how she had grown up, how her mother had taught her to rise above, even when things felt impossible. She spoke of the countless times she had been overlooked, dismissed, and made to feel less than because of where she came from. But instead of letting those experiences break her, Jasmine had learned to use them to fuel her strength. Her mother's mantra always rang in her head: "You rise above, Jasmine." The billionaire's son was no longer looking at her with disdain. His expression had softened. For the first time, he was hearing her, really hearing her, and in those moments, Jasmine saw something in his eyes that she hadn't expected: vulnerability. It wasn't remorse, but it was something close to it. He had no words, no defense for what he had said. He didn't know how to respond to her quiet strength. The power of her story had disarmed him in a way that no confrontation could have. Around them, the rest of the diners were listening now, some glancing at each other, others quietly nodding. There was an unspoken understanding spreading through the room. Jasmine wasn't just standing up for herself, she was standing up for anyone who had ever been made to feel small, for anyone who had ever been told they didn't matter. When she finished her story, there was nothing more to say. She didn't need to hear an apology from him. She didn't need to see him grovel. What mattered was that she had used her voice, her story, to claim her space in that moment. With a final glance at the young man, Jasmine turned to walk away. As she did, she caught the eyes of the other waiters and staff in the room. There was no judgment in their gazes, no disbelief. There was only quiet respect. Jasmine's heart was still pounding, but there was a feeling of peace settling over her. She had spoken her truth, and in doing so, had shifted something much larger than herself. The room, once thick with tension, now felt lighter. The air seemed to clear as she walked back toward the kitchen. As she passed the dining room, she overheard one of the customers at a nearby table say, "That was powerful." Jasmine smiled to herself, knowing that this wasn't just her story. This was a story shared by many, and today, she had given it a voice. Later, in the quiet of her apartment, Jasmine sat on her couch, still processing the events of the day. She hadn't expected the encounter to go viral, but within hours, it did. The story spread like wildfire across social media, gaining attention from outlets, and sparking conversations on topics she had only dreamed of addressing. But with that attention came something Jasmine hadn't anticipated: fear. People were calling her brave, strong. She had become a symbol of defiance. The weight of it all began to settle on her shoulders. She hadn't done it for recognition, but now, she was being thrust into the spotlight. Messages flooded in from strangers, offering support and admiration, but there were also harsh criticisms. Some praised her for handling the situation with dignity, others criticized her for not being more confrontational. The conflicting opinions left Jasmine questioning herself. Was she too soft? Had she missed an opportunity to truly put the billionaire's son in his place? Her phone buzzed again. Another message. She hesitated for a moment, then opened it. The message was from her manager at the restaurant. "Jasmine," it read, I wanted to reach out and check in. The team and I have been talking. We've seen what happened, and we're all proud of how you handled it. I want to make sure you're okay and to remind you that you don't have to carry this alone. If you're ready, there may be more opportunities waiting for you." Jasmine stared at the words, letting them sink in. It wasn't just her strength he was acknowledging, it was the opportunity for something bigger. Something she hadn't considered before. It was more than just handling a difficult customer, it was about leadership and change, and using her voice to shape the world around her. She had stood up for herself, but now she realized it was time to help others stand up, too. After Jasmine's viral moment, she was overwhelmed with both support and criticism. Some praised her for her calmness, others said she should have been harsher with the billionaire's son. She began to question herself. Was she too soft? Then, an email from her manager arrived. He expressed pride in how she handled the situation and shared that the company had received positive feedback. They even offered her a bigger role at the restaurant. Jasmine felt a sense of relief. The fear of losing everything she'd worked for faded. It was time to move forward, to embrace the opportunity and use her voice to make a real impact. Jasmine accepted the new role at the restaurant, taking on a leadership position to mentor others and promote a culture of respect. As she stepped into this new chapter, she realized her story had become bigger than herself. She was now a voice for change, helping others rise above their own struggles. Her days grew busier, but Jasmine felt stronger, more confident. She wasn't just serving food anymore, she was serving change, creating an environment where everyone could be seen and heard. As her influence grew, Jasmine knew the path ahead wouldn't always be easy. But with every challenge, she would rise above, just as her mother had taught her. Months had passed since Jasmine's viral moment, and she stood before a crowd at an event celebrating diversity in the restaurant industry. No longer just a waitress, she had become a symbol of resilience and strength for so many people who had faced similar struggles. The spotlight had shifted from the viral moment to a real transformation in her life. She was now a leader, not just in the restaurant, but in her community. As she spoke about dignity, overcoming adversity, and rising above, Jasmine felt an overwhelming sense of pride. She had stepped into a new role that allowed her to mentor others, teach them to value themselves, and help them navigate the challenges that came with working in a world often defined by status and power. The young woman who had once been humiliated in front of a crowded room had found her voice, and now she was using it to change the world around her. Her journey hadn't been easy. There were moments of doubt, times when the weight of the attention felt heavy, but Jasmine had learned to rise above. She had taken her story, her pain, her strength, and turned it into something much larger than herself. She wasn't just serving food anymore. She was serving change. As the applause echoed in the room, Jasmine felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The lessons her mother had taught her years ago, "You rise above, Jasmine," had become the foundation for everything she was today. Every step she took, every challenge she faced, had been an opportunity to rise above, to keep going, to keep fighting, and to make a difference. When the event was over, Jasmine stepped off the stage, knowing that her story was still unfolding. The journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. If you found this story inspiring, please like, comment, and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of courage and hope. Thank you for joining Jasmine's journey.